in the spirit of thank yous, I thank you, I thank Colin, I thank Nicole, I thank Jungwon, I thank the whole board of Slow Factory, as well as the interpreters and Krista and everyone that's helped me on the Tude family. Thank you, Ruthie, for helping me with my slides. And, we're all in this together. So let's kind of look at a little bit about me, my history, and then also the history of how Eurocentric beauty standards were formed and what we can do to get back to who we are. So who am I? Like I said, I'm a seeker. I'm a first generation Iranian American that grew up in a sea of blonde hair and blue eyes. And with that, I always had this sense of otherness that was embedded in me, because when you look so different than your classmates and you're teased a lot for your classmates based on your appearance, you start to sense that there's something wrong with you. And that central thesis of that I was less than, that I wasn't human, that I needed to shapeshift and code switch more than anyone else just to be valid, to get love, to feel worthy. All of these like low self-esteem issues, like a puppeteer on strings, controlled me throughout my life. And as a result, and I'll get into kind of the details later, I really tried so many things to kind of find what I wanted was called home. Home in terms of a friend community, home in terms of feeling like I belonged, as well as home to really going back to home, because I didn't know who I am, because so much of my life I was trying to fit in to be like everyone else. We'll talk a little bit about Tude, which is a makeup brand that I started that launched earlier this year, January 4th, that is really trying to disrupt the beauty industry and create a solution to really have an inclusive line that has non-toxic formulations, and just as importantly, non-toxic thinking, which is very much the spirit behind today's conversation. So after that, we'll kind of get a little bit into how we can heal and what we can do to help ourselves get wild and get rid of all the domestication that has happened toward us. So you were born in a world you don't fit in, because you were born to help create a new one. And this is me. Here are various photos of me growing up. Here's a picture of me and sixth grade graduation with my unibrow. Here's photos of me as a young child in first grade and even younger. And as you can see, there was an effervescence to me, and yet there was so much pain that was deeply embedded inside of myself because of my sense of otherness. Having a unibrow and hairy limbs and arms and tan skin and a mustache, and growing up in a very homogenous town in Massachusetts, I really never felt like I belonged, and all the bullying just reinforced that for me. And at a time in my life when you're young, you don't have the emotional wherewithal. In the 80s and 90s, there wasn't the same education when it comes to therapy and anti-bullying campaigns that there are today. What ends up happening is you shapeshift, you code switch, you try to figure out a way to survive because you don't really know any other way to be. And now as an adult, as a 41-year-old, I understand how much that impacted me, what I heard and what I saw, not only in my environment, but also in the media. When I was in 8th grade, my family and I moved to Florida. And I looked at that as an opportunity for myself to reinvent myself. I thought, aha, if no one here actually knows my secret about having a unibrow, I can actually tweeze it and then reinvent myself. And then I will save myself from all of the harm and all the psychological trauma that I experienced living in Massachusetts. Being a first generation Iranian American, and for any of you who come from a Middle Eastern background, you may know this already, but there was a lot of ties to hair and family honor as it relates to virginity and as it relates to being pure. And that's like a whole nother talk that maybe one day I'll come back to dissect. But there's this concept of when you are ready to remove hair because you're ready to make yourself quote unquote beautiful, which is already telling you that having hair is considered unattractive, then you're ready to get married off. And so when I asked my family if I could remove my unibrow, that caused a lot of tension. And I was told over and over again how I was too young to do that. At any rate, I think was very persistent. So by the time we moved to Florida, they did finally oblige. And when I allowed my grandmother very ceremoniously to take rid of those 100 hairs between my eyes, I just remember looking at myself in the mirror and being like, oh, I'm human. I didn't think I was human before. That is what Eurocentric beauty standards do to people. You are made to feel less than and unhuman because that is the way that they can have mind control over you to change your grooming habits, and more into the history and the context of that next. For the next 24 years, I was definitely enjoying that. The secret of the unibrow and the shame that really surrounded them, the secrecy of that was locked in my Pandora's box. I had thrown the key away and no one was going to find out. And I spent all those years doing everything I could to have proximity to whiteness, whether that was highlighting my hair, going on crazy diets, going through very painful hair removal treatments. Back then, there wasn't numbing cream the way that there is now. Wearing makeup a certain way, anything that I could do to look quote unquote white, to look like the Victoria's Secret models of the 90s or the supermodels and the hip hop honeys. That's what I did. And what was so interesting is that I thought by running away from it, it would never find me. And then the universe had a different plan for me. I became a mother to 3 daughters. My first 2 came out quite fair. And then my baby came out as a splitting replica of me. And that was this moment in time where I viewed her as a mirror to say, how do I see her effervescence, her beauty, her joy, and all of her hairiness and darkness? And I don't see that in myself. Why do I hate myself so much? I was afraid to really do the work to understand why, but I was conscious enough to ask myself that question. A few years later, I was at a point in my life where I had a little bit of confidence to kind of go on that journey, because I understood at that point that my daughters will absorb everything that I do, nothing that I say. And if they see a woman that's not empowered, that is not facing something that holds so much power over her, and seeing that it will change my behavior based on my insecurity, then they don't stand a chance of ever being free of their mental prisons and restrictions. So really, out of a way to kind of break free for them to not be imprisoned, I decided to grow back my unibrow and face something that lived in secrecy and shame. You know, Brene Brown speaks a lot about shame. And when I was learning and just starting like my consciousness and that spark into how much shame controlled me, I read a lot about her concepts about shame. And these 2 quotes I found to be quite powerful. Shame is the most powerful master emotion. It's the fear that we're not good enough. And if anything, my unibrow story showed you, I clearly didn't even think I was human. So I was not good enough. I wasn't even able to be a human. If we share our shame story with the wrong person, they can easily become one more piece of flying debris in an already dangerous storm. That speaks a lot to me about the beauty industry, and also having toxic friends and being part of systems of oppression, and being around people that do feel that we should live life one way. Sometimes that one way is the white way. Sometimes it's culturally, families feel like there's only one way of being. And so for people who are multifaceted or more in touch with who they are, and they are not what their family or society or their friends are telling them to be, that creates a lot of internal struggle. And I am raising my hand to say I was the president of that club, where I always thought there was something wrong with me for all the multitude of who I was, not for how little I didn't have one way to me. I had so much to me, and the world could not digest that. And so then I again thought that there was something wrong with me for having that capacity. So to understand and deconstruct all the unlearning the Eurocentric beauty forms, we have to really look at the history. We have to really get clear on that, because we can understand that even today, how much that still exists in every industry, not just beauty. The history of colonialism and imperialism and capitalism have so many roots and legacy that is embedded into the mindset of how we look at Eurocentric beauty. And here's a quote here: "All other beings of the world are not human, and therefore we're going to conquer them, take their land, and impose our standards of beauty onto them. And if you're not one of these things, what you see as white, then you are not seen as human." And when I read that quote, I just was this aha moment for me, because I said, wait, I also didn't think I was human. And that was just my own experience without having any of this context in terms of the history. So it just shows the level of mind control that happens and how much it destroys our sense of self and our self-esteem in order to be controlled and domesticated and stuck in the patterns of oppression. Colonialism and capitalism makes you have to be powered over. What I want to teach everyone is, how do we give power within and power to? So we have to understand its history to understand how to dismantle it. And as you can see on this slide here, it does a really good job of just showing the ebb and flow of all this. It's not even just one way, right? The colonialism and wanting to be powered over goes to capitalism. And for example, in the beauty industry, they profit off of creating these insecurities for us. They profit off of selling foundation that is only shades for, white people or European people. So anyone that is of color is made to feel that they're not even valid enough to have a shade of concealer made for them. That creates trauma. That makes us feel like we have to change who we are and that we're never enough. And then when you have all of these feelings internally from a psychological standpoint, you spread that perhaps through anger, through jealousy. Like, it just changes your behavior. And if we're really wanting to heal the world from not only Mother Earth perspective of saving the planet, which is very aligned with Slow Factory, we also need to save how we view ourselves, because there is not one or the other. Our connection to the earth is also our connection to self. So what is Eurocentric beauty? You may not know prior to this conversation. So I thought it was good to kind of list them out for you. It's really the default standard that we're told there's only one way to look. And these are typically features on a face or body that are synonymous with European features. So light, flawless skin, and kind of when I talk about that, it's like not having freckles or not having birthmarks or not having skin disorders that make us feel that there's something wrong with being born that way. Long, straight hair. I had curly hair. I still do. I can't tell you how many years I spent straightening them or doing keratin treatments or being afraid to get my hair wet or not wanting to get in the pool because of that. It's robbing us of joy, if you think about that. All of the indoctrination into upkeep completely changes our behavior and allowing us to actually live consciously and aligned with what we want to do. It's more changing us to do things to continue us to be on the bandwagon of continuing to buy services and products that perpetuate Eurocentric beauty forms. Thin eyebrows. Now I could, that was something that was very personal to me. I went to who was called or self-described as the eyebrow guru of New York City for so many years, from probably 19 to 37. And I think from 19 to 37, 18 years of my life, there wasn't a time where I didn't see him 2 to 3 weeks, all those years. Like I would plan vacations around him. I would plan, events, parties, whatever you name it. It was so important to me that my eyebrows were kept super arched, as thin as possible, and of no sign of my unibrow. In fact, I would also stay up late in college, and one of my favorite forms of procrastination when I had college essays due was to sit there with like that magnifying mirror and just start tweezing those middle hairs. That's how obsessed I was. And this goes back to mind control again. It's like if they distract us from actually connecting to ourselves and what our real purpose is in life, then they can completely control us in other ways. We are so much more than how we look, and we are so much more than needing to look one way. And there's so much beauty in all that we are. It feels so good to be free of this. Thin nose and lips, light colored eyes, to be kind of like just cardboard thin, no curves, able-bodied. These are some of the traits that perpetuate Eurocentric beauty. And now we have all these procedures to help you get there. So to me, it's about power and control, right? So how do Eurocentric beauty standards affect people? When our worth is tied to our appearance and our proximity to whiteness, it creates all of these dependencies. And I wanted to just highlight some facts around the world to show that this is not something that is happening just in America, that the Eurocentric beauty standard has invaded the world. In Iran, my parents' home country, it's the highest per capita for rhinoplasty in the world. If you go look at images of Iranian women today in their hijabs, what you see is oftentimes they have blonde hair. They're usually wearing colored lenses, and they have these kind of ski slope noses. Any semblance of their historical beauty that you would see of like darker features and more kind of pronounced eyebrows and noses are completely eradicated. It's fascinating to me and very sad to me to see how much that has been so pervasive in the motherland of my parents. In India, 80% of the moisturizers that are sold actually contain skin whitening ingredients. And it's not even a taboo topic. It's celebrated. In fact, major celebrity endorsements are happening in India to sell these products. So it's just widely acceptable and almost looked upon as fringe if you don't participate in that. Right now, there's been a big surge in Asian countries, East Asian countries, around giving women and men double eyelids. The way that in which like our own eyes are formed apparently are not good enough. And to that note about skin tone, as Asian countries have, Asian Pacific countries may have a lighter skin tone than people in India, 27% of Unilever's total skincare was based in a lightening product called Fair and Lovely. I mean, just the name inherent alone is so racist. Fair and Lovely as to dark and ugly. I mean, I'd just be curious about that. So all this to say, it's not that these are things that have happened in the past and we're now in this moment of inclusivity and diversity. This is stuff that's happening today, all the time. And it's very important for me to bring some consciousness and some conversations around it. All to say that we should all have personal choice and agency in creating our own beauty standards and no longer feeling indoctrinated into looking one way. Because there's nothing more radical, in my opinion, than someone that loves themselves in the face of a society that doesn't accept them. So here's a great kind of slide to show you the impact. So we talked a little bit about the history, we talked about the traits and the products, but what does that do to you mentally and psychologically and to various, degrees? So here's a picture of someone brushing their teeth, and, within the 3 minutes it takes to do that, the multitude of mental health kind of just topics that run through your brain for not feeling good enough. And, we touched upon this again with the low self-esteem. You could have eating disorders, depression, body dysmorphia, all of the above. And then from people of color, then that mindset continues to spread. So then there's colorism then amongst people of color, because the concept of being powered over is not something that just happens from whiteness to people of color. It happens within people of color as well, because what we're talking about is a power and control dynamic. So colorism happens, class connotations happen, changes in our activities happen every day. And I even spoke about some of the changes in my life that I made unconsciously. There's surgeries, we're just so ingrained that we don't even realize how much it's impacting us and our behavior. And in the beauty industry, and when we touch upon Tude, I mean, my goal with launching Tude was, how can I change the world? How can I create a community and a movement related to beauty that is no longer rooted in shame, but actually turns the conversation around and shows the faces that have never been shown and tells those stories of beauty that the beauty industry is too afraid to do. And today we still lack so much inclusivity in that industry. We look at images now as curated diversity. In my opinion, it's a casting, if you will, of it could be a dark-skinned girl, but that looks white. And so now we're starting to then cast of what diversity looks like, which again is not solving the problem, but actually perpetuating Eurocentric beauty standards, but in a hidden agenda way. So I just wanted to raise that to the audience. We touched a little bit about foundations and concealers and needing to contour your face, because apparently only the shape of a face one way. I was at a event with a plastic surgeon once, and they said to me, if you just put Botox in these areas, you can soften your face and then you'll have more of a rounder face, because the face shape you have is indicative of an Asian bone structure. And I looked at him and I was like, yeah, I'm Persian. I'm going to have an Asian bone structure. I'm not going to change the shape of my face because of that. And I think my face shape is fine. So just to let you know, it can even come to you. You may not even want to change the shape of your face, but all of the messages that we get are telling us that there's only one way to be. So from skin whitening products to fillers to hair removal, not only taming of hair and straightening it, but from laser, waxing, shaving, I mean, you name it, there isn't a product out there that's telling you hair is for animals, hair is wrong, hair, it does not belong on a person's face or body, and that smoothness is the standard. And I just wanted to touch a little bit also about appropriation and relates to shame. Appropriation creates even greater shame for people of color that don't look and have those European features, because on one hand, we're made to feel like we're not human since we don't look European. And then on the other hand, only when through capitalism or in white culture, when they want to appropriate some of the features of other cultures, then it's acceptable, but yet it's still not acceptable for us to have them. So for example, I just made a list here, like that whole like fox eye look and fillers for fuller lips and fuller butt cheeks and self tanners and hair extensions and weaves and lash extensions, all these things that have, darker skin, fuller hair, the change in the shape of the eye, and also in terms of curvature of the body. Now it's appropriate, but only if you are a European, you can now go and get those quote unquote ethnic features. That creates even greater shame and greater anger and greater confusion for people like us. God, I love Audre Lorde. We have been raised to fear the yes in ourselves. So now I'm going to show you how can you not fear the yes, but reclaim the yes. And what's better than through photos? I'm a writer, and part of me in terms of helping myself heal from all of the trauma that I've experienced of my life of feeling less than an other has a lot to do with soul scribing. I write a lot first thing in the morning as well, and I take a lot of walks in nature whenever I'm allowed to. And this whole concept of rewilding came to me, and I think also I'm so embedded in the environment too, and I was looking at nature and how beautiful it is in its wilderness and thinking like, how am I becoming wild again? What does that even mean to a human being? So I love this three concepts of rewilding, reclaiming, and rewriting your beauty narrative or any aspect of yourself. And what does rewilding mean? And I wanted to put the definition here in terms of what it means from an environmental perspective. It's the ecological restoration where humans step back and leaving an area to nature, as opposed to more of an active form of natural resource management. And that can create ecosystems that require passive management. Now, just think about my unibrow story alone of going to the groomer and think about the analogy that that has. So if I stepped back and allowed my eyebrows to grow in without anyone touching them, in a way that is very analogous to what I just read in the definition of rewilding. I let it grow back, so it's its natural state, so it would require less maintenance. What an interesting concept as we learn to unlearn Eurocentric beauty forms. And then in terms of human rewilding, it's more or less the same, but it's really looked upon as how are we undoing domestication? How are we looking at life in a much more of a holistic manner versus very specific behaviors and actions that need us to follow suit in a certain way? I really look at my life as performance art. I think all of us, life is performance art. And when I start to look at photos of myself throughout the years, when I really think about the rewilding, reclaiming, and rewriting, I thought, what would be more impactful than actually showing you firsthand how I've done that through the years. So we start off here with, I think I must have been 10 or 11 years old, wearing a traditional Qajar dynasty outfit from Iran. And I remember feeling so ethnic, and I went, this was my Halloween costume, probably like around 4th or 5th grade. And then here's a photo of me when I'd moved to Florida. This is very much in the 90s. And as you can see, my eyebrows are so much thinner here. I have straight hair, and I needed to put the curls back. So I would always straighten the front too, because that would take not as much time. And I just I look at her and I just see someone who's trying so hard to fit in, who's so unsure of who she is, but just trying on different identities to find some sort of comfort. Fast forward to me being on that hamster wheel of conformity. I look at this photo as the saddest photo. Here I am. This is me actually after 3 children. I was never this thin prior to children, but I got so enraptured in being as thin as possible. I think right here I was down to like 10% body fat. And while I didn't have a quote unquote eating disorder in the way in which that we have maybe been trained in, I just definitely a body dysmorphia disorder, because I was an exerciseaholic. And I think a lot of times we're told that it's good to exercise because that keeps us healthy. It is good to exercise. However, it's not good to exercise when you're obsessive about every little inch that's on your body. And you can see my face here with the separated brows. I look absolutely miserable, and I was just obsessed. And for a lot of my 30s, again, when I talk about distraction, instead of understanding who I was just so distracted of what I should look like. And in this bottom photo with the yellow background, here is me growing back my unibrow. And here's my nose that has been broken 3 times. And I just love the curvature of the unibrow as it slopes down my nose with a scarf around, because for me, it was this moment back in 2017 when I grew my eyebrow back in, of me just facing a face of my ancestors as well. I don't think we do enough justice to honor our roots and where we came from. This photo of me with the blue eyebrows is me throwing colors and crystals on parts of myself that I once held in shame. So the first step of me rewilding was facing what was in my Pandora's box, then visually growing it out on my face, and then getting to a level of confidence where I'm like, not only am I comfortable now walking in society with my unibrow, but I'm also now going to throw color and crystal on it so you can't look away. That is really watching my evolution in terms of how I viewed myself. And then in these bottom 2 photos, it was important for me to show this to you because through COVID, I have continued on this journey of rewilding. Just growing my unibrow back in was the first step. I thought when it had grown back in that was the final step. And what I now understand is that was just the first step in a journey of rewilding. So what else was I conformed to when it came to Eurocentric beauty standards? I was definitely coloring my hair every few weeks too, because I went gray quite young. So I call these my COVID grays, which I lovingly am keeping now that you can go to a hair salon to get your hair colored. And that in and of itself was something very hard for me to face. I thought facing my unibrow was something challenging, but I couldn't believe the constructs that we've also been taught about age and sexuality, as well as beauty. And you can also see I have something called COVID curves. I have a fuller body. I think in that top photo, if I was at 10% body fat, I think the bottom photo, I'm around 18, 20% body fat. And in a way, I've never felt more confident in my life about the way I look. It feels really good to be free of anyone telling me what to do, how I should look. And that confidence is something the beauty industry cannot sell you. And that's the greatest drug on earth, is loving yourself and not needing validation. So my message to you is validate yourself, because when you validate yourself, that is the most intoxicating, beautiful vibration, and that you could just carry on with. And here's just some memes, if you will, or some things that I found on Instagram that I wanted to just share quickly with you. And I love this center one right here about Wakanda, because in Wakanda, they didn't know what Eurocentric beauty standards were. So here Trevor Noah is saying to her, no one has straightened hair in Black Panther. Why is that important? And she says, before the advent of the white man, Black people on the continent were doing all sorts of things with their hair. The idea of extensions and all that is not new, but the shaming or rejecting of kinks and curls is new. And that's what we're talking about with the colonialism, the capitalism that came to power over, not only take our land, but also take away our rights in terms of how we feel about ourselves. That did come with the white man. And so in the story, Wakanda is a country that's never been colonized. So they embrace themselves. They have their own sense of what is beautiful. And here are just a few other things in here for you to take a look at. And I do want to note that one more thing when it comes to reclaiming your beauty narrative, we have to be so careful of what messages that we're ingesting. And part of the healing and therapy is also making sure that the way we look at the food that we ingest, we're also looking at the messages that we take on. Someone that I work with, we were talking a lot about our Instagram feeds and how they could potentially be different based on who you follow. And we were saying how it's so important that part of the reclamation is taking responsibility and understanding that anything toxic that is perpetuating Eurocentric forms of beauty, whether it's influencers that look a certain way and only perpetuate that sense. If that's toxic to you to ingest, unfollow them, because there's a level of freedom you'll never experience if you attempt to hate your body into submission. So if we're constantly comparing ourselves to people that don't make us feel good, or if friends are in competition with us, or there's jealousy, or there's only looking a certain way, take a moment, maybe take inventory of that, and see how it may feel to slowly but surely remove yourself from that dynamic. Because I will tell you firsthand, when I went through that process myself, my entire world changed for the positive. And I started to understand that not only was I just domesticated by society to look a certain way, that toxic behavior also percolated into my friendships and relationships and romantic partners. Because when you're brainwashed and ingrained in a pattern, that pattern will follow you into every aspect of your life. So I'm here today to say, you are beautiful just the way you are, and you should be aligned with people who have that reciprocity towards you and with you. And if it doesn't feel easy in that way, maybe take a moment to reflect on that, and that there could potentially be a new way forward. The respect for Mother Earth starts with the respect that we have with ourselves. And that really talks about the analogy that I have about rewilding and wilderness that we see on Earth, and the rewilding and wilderness that we have internally within ourselves, that connection to self and our soul. When we're born, our soul is perfect. The world tells us that we're not. Let's go back to how we were born. Tude is my personal passion project, my activism, and my need to change the world, to create a world that I always wanted to belong to create an environment and a beauty brand that spoke to me, because I still don't feel that there's a beauty brand that speaks to me. And I'll tell you why. Every beauty brand out there was telling me that I was wrong. Even if they had inclusivity and diversity, even the products that they sold and sell are telling me that I need to erase who I am, not embrace it. So at Tude, we really believe we're at the intersection of clean, color, high-performing cosmetics. And with that, I wanted to remove shame from the conversation. I don't want you to feel like you have to contour your face or wear concealer so you have quote unquote flawless skin like we saw on the Eurocentric beauty list. I want to only create products that can add to already who you are. What if we look at beauty as showing up just as we are, and these are paints, just as our beautiful Indigenous brothers and sisters and Native Americans, when they paint themselves and they go in ritual and ceremony, I wanted to give paints to the world to self-express and wear anywhere we want. The beauty industry tells you that blush goes on cheeks and lipstick goes on lips, and they even tell you where to put the makeup. I don't know if we ever really talked about that before. I really believe we're all creators, and as creators and artists, we can express how we feel. I don't want to tell you where to wear your makeup. So if you want to wear it in your armpit hair or on your unibrow, I have a little bit of glitter on, I'm not sure if you can see it, or if you want to wear it on your happy trail, or in where the industry has defined as traditional places, on your eyes, lips, cheeks, you're allowed to, but honor where you want to do it. I think it's about consciousness. It's about knowing that we no longer have to cover up who we are. And it's a time that we need to step up and live in a world where we're fully embraced as is, no longer needing to conform to Eurocentric forms of beauty, no longer needing to take a 7-minute or to watch a 7-minute contouring tutorial so we can change the shape of our faces. Doesn't it feel good to take that sigh of relief and say, I'm good enough? Well, that's Tude, and it's short for attitude. It's about knowing that you have the agency any moment to shift and pivot how you feel about yourself. You can cut those chains that have kept you ingrained to being a certain way. I know when I changed my perception of how I viewed myself, that is when my whole world changed. And that's when all of these creative facets started to form. When I started to say, hey, I've allowed all these people to brainwash me. What if I brainwash myself? And it's not even brainwashing. What if I remind myself and go back to who I actually am? Who I am was not born with shame. And part of this was for me to unlearn everything that was taught to me so I could go back to just who I am. That's Tude. And when we talk about non-toxic thinking, we are really talking also about inclusivity in the beauty industry. For our inaugural campaign, I really wanted to show the faces that haven't been told in a beauty campaign before. And I was very intentional with who we cast. I didn't go for the quote unquote conventional models. And here is just like a display of a few stories that I wanted to share with you. So right here, this couple, they're a queer interracial couple where Cruz transitioned to a woman and they decided to stay together. And to me, there's nothing more beautiful than that. And there's no greater symbolism of what true love really means. It was important for me to highlight that story. It was important for me to interview them and have them share their story, because true beauty is being who you are. And for me, the embodiment of their love and their connection, and you can see even how they're wearing, one is wearing color behind the eyes and one is wearing it on the eyebrows. It talks about personal choice and also connection to love and self. And there's nothing more beautiful to me than that. Here we have this beautiful girl named Ana. She is from Mexico. She's indigenous from Mexico. She had a unibrow, she had a mustache, she had sideburns on her face, facial hair, armpit hair, and she's a breastfeeding mother to a child that was less than a year old. And when I saw her, she just took my breath away. And I saw the way that she cared for her daughter and was nursing her when I met her, and immediately thought, there's no way I'm not going to put that child in this campaign. Like, that to me is beautiful. We always think that the beauty industry is selling to the youth, and we can only show perfect like complexions and bodies and hair, and that beauty is only for the youth. I disagree. I feel more beautiful as I get older. I think the older I become, the more beautiful I am. And so I wanted to honor the evolution, my personal evolution when it came to motherhood, and how that was this moment in time for me to really shift my perception of self. And so I wanted to honor that too in this story with Ana and her beautiful daughter. And so we put the daughter in the campaign, and this all happened just from me meeting her and her nursing her daughter in our first interview. And then, this cutie right here, this is actually my second daughter, Savannah. She was 9 years old when we took this photo. And what's so interesting about Savannah is that she inherited the light features from her European father, but she's quite hairy. She has a lot of hair all over her body, and she has these beautiful thick brows and long lashes. And nothing made me prouder than to witness her spreading the color cream on her eyebrows and at the tips of her lashes, and her just like seeing her mother build a business that really spoke to disrupting everyone's sense of what is acceptable, and also knowing that beauty conversations start at this age and younger. And with Tude, I wanted to facilitate conversations of like, who is beauty for? What is beauty like? How do you wear it? That I could start even with this young generation to not even to help educate them into the parts of the body that they could wear their makeup, and to help them from not getting indoctrinated into where the industry is telling them to wear their makeup. And then last but not least, all the way on the left, this is Dusty. And Dusty I remember during his interview, he was talking about he got bullied a lot for his skull, and for being like larger when he was a kid. And he goes, look at me now, my skull is what got me on this set. And here he is with color cream on his fingers and his eyebrows painted. And here's someone that didn't have hair there, but he's actually throwing color on an area too. So here is our way to kind of say to the industry, you don't have to have one type of model or curated diversity. You can show real people with real stories, and they're just as powerful as what we have historically seen. That is how we disrupt. That is how we change the world. That is how we change and unlearn that there's only one way of being and looking. And this is my family. And this is a lot about generational beauty as well. That's my mother. She was 63 years old here, to me and my 3 daughters. And to know that I wrote this poem for Mother's Day that I wanted to share with you, which is breaking ancestral trauma patterns, healing family karma, all while mothering myself and mothering 3 others. That really kind of goes full circle with my evolution of giving birth to my children, and then also letting that be a mirror for me to say, how am I reclaiming my unibrow, unlearning Eurocentric beauty standards, and then channeling my pain into power by creating Tude? And how can I also unlearn some of the things that my family from the Iranian side culturally that they didn't realize had passed down to me as it relates to shame with body hair, and how now I'm the breaker of chains. We all can be breaker of chains, where we now pass on a new narrative to our children. And that is how we rewrite ancestral trauma patterns. And Tude, non-toxic formula. So what is in our line? We have creamy eyeshadows. We have the first to market biodegradable glitter. And we also have these various tools that allow you to self-express, and also our response to single-use materials. We have a magic swab here. So instead of getting these single-use Q-tips, they have these perforated nubs on one side and a flat head on the other side. So you can dip into the color cream and spread the color on your brows, as well as draw cat eyes. We just wanted to give tools that you could wash in the sink, store in its reusable case, and have forever. Not only is it economical in terms of not needing to waste and throw in the dump, but it's also really economical for your wallet as well. You buy it once and you have it. With eyebrows being so central to my story, it was important for me to come up with a product that would allow me to place my brows in a certain way and play around them. So we created something called a soap brow. And with the soap brow, we have this Tude brush here that is made out of recycled bamboo and natural bristles that allows you to place water with it. You brush it and you kind of do these brush strokes, and it allows you to look at a new way of microblading, if you will. I call it nature's microblading, because it allows you to fluff, feather, accentuate, and style your brows however you want, whenever you want. And it's not just for eyebrows. You can put it in your edges, you can put it in your beard, you can put it in your armpit hair, wherever there is an area of hair that you want to sculpture. The soap brow product and the Tude brush is great for that. And we also have something called a paintbrush, which is another tool. It's in a bigger, larger format to allow for larger parts of the body. Like if you wanted to put glitter all over your chest, or if you wanted to put it in your armpit hair, or if you just wanted to use the flat side and use it with a skincare routine or a mask, you can use that too. Like, because Tude will not invest in creating a full product line, because I will not invest in building things that make you feel like you need to erase yourself. If you want to use a foundation, you can use the paintbrush and you could spread that foundation on your skin smoothly. We're not in competition with everyone, and there's room at the table for everyone. I truly believe that. We just want to create innovation to an overpolluted industry that allows people to remove shame from their conversation and to bring joy and fun back into creation of self, both internally and externally. And last but not least, we have a makeup remover. And while we didn't decide to go into skincare, that was very much born out of knowing that when I was building these products and testing them, I couldn't find anything that would allow me to take the color off seamlessly and without irritation. And so as a result of that, that is what made me think, how can I come up with a clean way so my children can wash their face in the shower and it gets off the stickiest formulations, from face paints to bio glitter to you name it. You can either use it with a Tude brush and take off color if you have it on your eyebrow, or you can just use it, take it out of the tin and wash your face with it. And a little bit about BioGlitter, because of this innovation, is so near and dear to me, and really offering a solution to a growing problem in the industry. I wasn't aware of how much toxicity was in the industry until I started with the labs. I went in with no formal education. I just knew from being pregnant what were the hormone disruptive ingredients that I found in products. And when I asked the lab about how I could develop a glitter, it was only when I went into testing that I understood that it was made out of plastic. I actually didn't know. As a result, I threw out my entire year's worth of research and the 8 colors of glitter that we had created. And I thought, I have to figure out a way to make this biodegradable. I searched and searched and searched. After about, I think, 6 months, I came across the raw material of the BioGlitter that was made out of eucalyptus cellulose. It was tested with a third party that was certified to be plastic free, called from TUV Austria, which is the highest level of independent certification for freshwater biodegradability in the world. So when you took the raw material, the hexagon of the BioGlitter, and if you wash it off and it goes into your sink and the faucet and it goes into fresh water or salt water, it will literally biodegrade in 28 days. And if an animal comes in contact with the raw material of that BioGlitter and ingest it, it is secreted out, so it doesn't even harm the animals. And that was very important to me too. I think with Tude, it was important that we're not only thinking about non-toxic formulas, but we're also thinking about how that impacts Mother Earth. There's so much to do with packaging that we need to do better on, even our manufacturing practices of where we are creating the products. All of our products are made in America. We even look at the manufacturing practices of our plants to make sure that they're using solar energy in the manufacturing. We want to do our part to be part of the solution. And we really invite Big Beauty to say, we know that you want to create this product for 30 cents or less, and you want to create, and with your capitalistic viewpoint, you want to make as much money as possible. But isn't it about time that we put Mother Earth first? Isn't it about time that we put our human endocrine system first? Like, you have responsibility to be part of this change. And shame on you that a single mother of 3 with no understanding was able to kind of just from her heart figure out a solution to this. So I really invite all of us to work together, because I really do feel like we are on borrowed time. And last but not least, the healing part. Really quickly, I didn't want to just come here and talk about how to unlearn Eurocentric beauty, a little bit about my life story, knowing that we have all the ability to reclaim ourselves, and also about my personal mission of kind of disrupting the beauty industry, but also like, how does that relate to you? Something that has really helped me with my own trauma and therapy is understanding this concept of the internal family systems, and knowing that we are all made of various parts. And it's from 2 paradigms, where it's like systems thinking and thinking of our mind. And to know that we can actually close our eyes like we did in the beginning and have a boardroom with ourselves and see what parts of us are coming up and what are the conversations. Is it jealousy? Is it that there's nervousness? Is it anxiety? Is it a workaholicness? And so with that, there are 8 C's of self-leadership that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. And so when we feel any of these, that's when you know you're connected to self. Because when I talk about rewilding and going back to yourself, some of you may not know what that means. I didn't know what that meant. And the 8 C's are confidence, calmness, creativity, clarity, curiosity, courage, compassion, and connectedness. And here's a beautiful diagram to really talk about that. When we are connected to the self, then we are in self-leadership, and then we don't feel like anyone can control us, because we can sit with the parts of us that are acting and needing attention. And so then there's like these three other parts that could speak up, where self energy can help guide them. And those are exiled parts, the parts that hold the painful emotions, the parts that become extremely activated and carry burdens and be wounded. And that was very much central to my unibrow story. I had so many exile parts that were in so much pain, and I had to learn how to heal them one by one and continue to do so in order to really help with the reclamation of myself. Some examples of those are like rage, shame, dependency, fear, grief, loss, loneliness. Those are still things that I struggle with today. And then there's these manager parts of us that try to protect our system in an effort to control our situation and relationships in order for us to not get hurt or rejected. And some of those examples are when you're a controller and you striver, or you're a caretaker, or you're judging, or you're passive, or you're a pessimist, or you're a planner, or you're a self-critic. That's actually not self energy. Those are parts of you that are trying to come in to help you from feeling either hurt or rejected. It's very interesting. I didn't really understand that. I always thought that, especially as a mother, I need to be a caretaker, and that means I'm doing something that is good. But when I'm doing that, it's a part of me that needs to act that certain way, instead of just, I think the whole concept is just being is good enough. And last but not least, the firefighters. They're also there to protect the systems, but they act after the exiles in terms of to make people not upset. So some examples of this is like when you sleep too much, shopping, work, sex, diet, exercise, some of the things that we were talking about, binge eating, distractions, obsessions, compulsions. I can really, and I'm happy to leave my email here. And if you have any further questions in the chat, I can kind of tend to that. But last but not least, I want to say there are 3 R's. And I leave you with this question, and this can be helpful in terms of your journaling. Ask yourself the following question: what in my life is creating rhythm? What in my life is creating ritual? And what in my life is creating routine? And when you ask yourself that, and you can ask yourself that every day, and the answer may change, that is how you're allowing tenderness to help guide you through difficult situations and get closer to self. So Celine, I was trying to be quick for you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Shari, for pouring your heart into this amazing class. We loved it so much. In the beginning, you had a slide called Roots and Legacy, and in it you describe, hold on, I'm trying to open it up. We have to get clear on the history of colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism, and different arms and legs of it to understand how its roots and legacy are embedded in current day society and various industries. And the colonialist mindset as it relates to Eurocentric standards of beauty. There's a quote in here, and people wanted to know, where did you get that quote from? So all of other beings of the world are not human, and therefore we are going to conquer them, take their land, and impose our standards of beauty onto them. And if you're not of these things, what we see as white, then you are not seen as human.
So my therapist that I work with, because I actually have like a whole healing group of people, because as you all know, when you do this work, you really need support too. And that's part of honoring self and self-love. She does a lot of work in education in terms of dismantling all of this. So these were all resources that she had on her website. Her name is Jules Perkel, and perhaps I could find a link to that stuff and send it on after the presentation. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Okay, and then there's an amazing questions from James. How do you personally embrace your divinity?
Oh, that's so beautiful. How do I personally embrace my divinity? You know, can I tell them a personal story, Celine, about me and you?
Okay.
Okay. So Celine came over my house about a month ago. It was October 8th, and it was the day of Kazimi. And every Saturday I have a reading with a very beautiful woman. Her name is Susan. She lives in Chicago, and we do a Zoom, and she accesses the Akashic records. And through the Akashic records, it is Akashic records is all of time, the records of time. And through that, we both kind of, it's a co-creation where we see questions that come to us, and we kind of ask the records and they respond to us. Through that, I was really able to feel more connected to myself and my guides and my divinity, to understand the interconnectedness that I have, and also be so aligned with what I was put on this earth to do. And Celine and I actually did an Akashic reading together, which is the first time I ever did that. And it was amazing. And I don't know if you want to touch upon that, Celine, just the downloads that we got, things that Celine and I were talking about literally an hour to minutes before were being told back to us through the records. So if there's any doubt that we have connection to a creator or guides or higher power, I mean, that experience alone rocked me to my core. And nature. Let's not forget nature. I feel more attuned to nature than I do human beings.
Yes, absolutely. Anush, she, her, Mirbigyan. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name. Anush, thank you for all of this. She says, you mentioned historical beauty traditions that come from many of our home or origin countries, which aren't the desired standard. How do we reclaim these beauty histories that are rooted in ritual, symbolism, and so intertwined with the culture of these countries and traditions?
I love that question, because that's something that I personally experience as well. And I know my own parents have sometimes felt that I am not disrespectful, but that I can kind of maybe be angry about things that were passed on or inherited to me. And my answer is this: get to know yourself first. Who are you? Because before you can think about how you feel about traditions that were passed on to you culturally, I want you to get really clear on who you are, because I know that for so much of my life, I was told what a good Iranian girl looked like, did, acted, did for a job, how she was married, how she behaved. And that felt a little bit inconsistent to me. And that inconsistency caused a lot of discord and disruption internally. Once I removed that from myself and got very clear on who I am and what I stand for and my values, then I could go back to my family's traditions and culture, and then understand what are those things that I want to continue to integrate into my life. What are those things that don't feel consistent to who I truly am? And what are those things that I want to pass on to future generations? So my answer is just get really clear first on who you are. And then when you have that, you'll really be able to unfold the rest.
I love that. That's such a great response to know yourself, how you relate to your own culture. Um, how can we center Black and or dark-skinned folk in this conversation, knowing that their bodies have faced harder of these consequences?
I totally agree. And I think I'm such an ally and advocate, for that conversation. I think for me personally, I can only speak for myself. I really look at now my opportunity with Tude to have a platform to show various Black faces, right? And that's kind of what I meant about curated diversity. I feel like nowadays brands want to put Black faces on to look cool or in vogue and not get canceled. It's not really coming from a place of showing the multitude of what Blackness is in its beauty and in its power. And so I think all I can do is share faces, share Black faces, share Black stories, share Black bodies that haven't been shared before, because only through that visual representation, through the audio representation, through us seeing it, right? It's like it creates more normalization, and then we can help promote and uplift one another. Because I totally agree with you. It's so hard to get that recognition and to get that representation in the media. But I'm also open to whatever suggestions that you have as well.
Melanie DP says, how did your family, partner, friends reacted to your rewilding? Do you have any tips to deal with loved ones policing you to conform to beauty standards?
I do middle fingers up. But yeah, so actually didn't respond really well. And believe it or not, I was shamed by people that I thought should be in my support center. They thought, what's wrong with you? You look so much more attractive with 2 eyebrows. I can't tell you all of the toxic messages that I received from this investigation. Or why are you so angry? Why do you need to, be on this journey? All this to say is, when you're ready to start the rewilding process, know that comments will be said and people will show how they truly feel. And all that does is it makes you crystal clear on who's aligned with you and what not. Thank the universe for giving you that clarity, because you only want to vibe with that reciprocity. And sometimes a chosen family is better than one that you're born into.
Thank you for that. That's really great. I mean, I think that once you start listening to yourself and stop betraying yourself, and this is something that I'm learning even recently in the past 24 hours that this came to me. I noticed when I betrayed myself, went against my own spirit, against my own intuition, against my own, just calling, let's say, that once I stopped doing that and I hold myself as, I don't want to betray myself, I want to follow myself, I started losing a lot of people that much rather see me betray myself, because then I'm weaker and I am more submissive and I am less of what I'm supposed to be, and that's less intimidating, I guess. And so into becoming more and more yourself, there's a lot of loss that happens as well. It's not all kumbaya and happy. There's a lot of healing. There's a lot of loss, because people that you think are your closest, you think they're your sisters or your ride or die, when you become much more aware of who you are and you refuse to betray yourself, so you stand toward, like you stand with yourself, you are in solidarity with yourself, there is loss that happens. That's
Tremendous
what I've experienced. So it isn't a journey of, oh, like we're free, like healing is, it's sometimes very sad and painful, because choosing yourself means you're gonna not choose your peers or others, because they don't choose you by the end of the day. And realizing that is painful.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think I just wanted to say that the last few years have been the most painful years of my life. And it may look like there's success, like you said, like, oh, I'm free, I am free. And through that freedom was the hardest unburdening process ever. And it made me lose almost every single person in my life. But you know what? It was worth gaining me. And that's what I have for you. And when you are so connected to self, then you really understand what the word self-love means.
Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. This talk will be available online. These conversations are ongoing. Next week, we'll continue the conversation with Dr. Yaba Blay. And maybe you want to end with one last note. What specific things do you tell your daughters so they love themselves? And maybe we can leave everyone on that note.
Well, that's a tough one. I just encourage my daughters to invest in knowing themselves, and that I am just their conduit and their guide in facilitating their self-actualization. And so I encourage them to write their feelings down. I encourage them to paint. I encourage them to move their bodies, to immerse themselves in nature, and to feel the power of the sun and the moon and the entirety of the universe, to know how significant we are in terms of our connectivity to one another and ourselves. And so I really try to teach them that spiritual practice, because I feel like if they understand that at this age, then they will understand and honor the beauty within themselves as it relates to them and Mother Nature.
And having met your daughters and them meeting my daughters, I know that we have a lot in common in how we raise our kids and how they are towards each other and how they are towards themselves. And I think that it's an ongoing process, and intergenerational healing is super, super important. It's such a core part of all of ours, freedom and healing and the kids being themselves and so on. So I think that there should be a second part of this. It's now 1:30. I'm just conscious of time. This has been so amazing. I think we could have gone on and on and on all day long. Thank you so much, Shari.
Thank you so much,
much,
everyone.
Thank you to the Tude team. And thank you, of course, Leah and Veronica, Slow Factory team, you're the best. And thank you, everyone that is part of OpenEDU. I see you coming here every week, and you guys are amazing. And thank you for your thoughtful questions, your challenging questions. We'll get to them. I'll share them with Shari and her team. And then what we will do is we'll share some answers in Slack, and maybe we'll have Shari come pop in Slack and check out the conversation. And the Tude has a Slow Factory discount code. It has also been shared in the Slack channel. It has also been shared in the newsletter. So the holiday season is coming. If you want to adorn your bodies, do it in an ethical way that is good for the earth and good for the people, and do it in a way that does not produce and release more microplastics into this planet. And please support Tude so that we don't release more microplastics, and also you support an amazing team led by Shari. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, just in gratitude for all the souls and your openness and for your willingness to learn and teach me. So, amen. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend.
And go and be yourselves and experiment and see what happens, and who are the friends that stick around and who are the friends that are there to betray you, and be at peace with being with yourself instead of with folks that don't necessarily align with who you are. And on that note, that's from me to you. Thank you all so much for being here, and talk soon.
Talk soon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.